Good afternoon. Thank you for leaving the crush downstairs to be here for a Gutenberg moment. Alix wrote a wonderful novel that really even became a romance to an extent. I couldn't believe you could do that, about Gutenberg, called Gutenberg's Apprentice. Erik is the head of one of the major design firms in Germany. As he said, many of his clients are here. Does digital design, but also is back into letterpress. So Gutenberg, real quick intro here, because I think it's vital to where Steffi says that the topic of DLD is going. It's just the beginning. It took 50 years after the invention of the press for the book to take on the form that we now know as books. It took 100 years, says Elizabeth Eisenstein, for the impact of the book in society to be fully recognized. It took 150 years after the invention of the Gutenberg Bible before anyone thought to invent a newspaper. 150 years. So part of what we want to talk about today is where we are in this process relative to Germany and innovation today. One more point. I would argue that Gutenberg was the first technology entrepreneur, that Mainz was the Silicon Valley of its day. Gutenberg had to grapple with many, many technological problems. It wasn't just the press, it was the handheld mold, it was the metallurgy, it was the formulation of ink. There were tons of technological issues. He also had to deal with the idea of raising capital, because he was in a risk business. He had to buy the paper and build the plant before he got his cash flow. Alix and I can go back and forth with this, but his main funder, basically Johann Fust, took over the business, in essence, and Peter Schoeffer then made it grow and grow and grow. It was very secretive at first, Gutenberg was, and then it opened up and in essence spread across the world. But the impact of the book, the fear about the book, the uncertainty about the book is very parallel, I think, to where we are today. And so that's what we want to talk about. Alix.
What I would say is I just want to draw your attention to a printed page from the Goethe example of the Gutenberg Bible. And as you can see, it resembles a manuscript page. And that was intentional. I would say the Gutenberg Bible was the Kindle of its day. We're talking about, with Jeff, the first age of print. I wrote this novel, Gutenberg's Apprentice, from a period 35 years later, which I think I would argue is roughly where we stand today. The technology took decades to perfect. I would go further and say that it was the world's first tech startup because it was not simply a lone genius, Johannes Gutenberg. It was a consortium. He had a VC, Johann Fust, and he had a technician. So it was that trio of activities that Isaacson describes in his recent book, collaborative teamwork that brought this thing. And they had many, many, many obstacles, technical, but also political. What happened, and this is, I think, really where we are, is, as Jeff said, the book arrived in 1500, the handheld Octavo book that we recognize as the book. That was the killer app for this new technology. We're not there yet. What did happen is the Catholic Church figured out that this was a very bad thing and they instituted censorship. So I think this is a topic that we can discuss further, that, you know, not only is the similarity in the startup culture of minds, but this long, bumpy road, we're just at the beginning. It's really early days, is what I would say.
Erik, you still work in this magnificent medium of text that Gutenberg first put in lead, and Peter Schoeffer and others made far more beautiful. Jensen made the first really readable font. You work in fonts today. Are you, in an age of YouTube, in an age of audio, are you optimistic, pessimistic about text itself?
Well, it's well known that we read more than we ever have done. The internet is a read medium. There are images, but basically we read. And the similarity I see to the Gutenberg time was that we've spent the last maybe 2 decades since we've had a browser, it's 21 years now, grappling with technology, you know, how to get this stuff done. You know, we had HTML, then we had CSS, and now we can almost make anything online without really knowing code. In our office, the coders and designers work together, and more often than not, you don't know them apart. So the designers know code, coders know design, so we've left that behind. Now we can actually concentrate on the medium. And my lesson from the first 50 years is that we're back to where we were. The book, that's the optimal size for a book. because that's our hand. And our hand isn't going to go away anytime soon. Neither are the distance of our eyes from each other, nor this distance. So the kids who design stuff these days, if they remember, that's what has been proven to be the best way to read over 500 years, will be the best way to read. So when we don't imitate books, we make new books, but we'd be foolish to ignore what has come before us the 500 years. We know what good text looks like. We know what the hierarchies are like. We know what the fonts look like. And now the webbies are sort of discovering this as though it's new, and I feel slightly ridiculed sometimes that I've been saying this forever, like old guys do, but it is right. The book has found its optimal form a few hundred years ago, and we are now got to a point where we can make books in whatever medium, whether we make it digitally or whether we read it digitally. The book has an optimal form, and we are there to do so today.
But, Alex, as you point out, the text there is meant to imitate scribes' handwriting. Indeed, printing was originally known as automated writing. We always see the future in the analog of the past. Horseless carriages, ice boxes, and so on. And it took time to break out of that presumption to create a book. But now on the internet, I think we still see that books, magazines, and newspapers are predominantly recognizable as books, magazines, and newspapers online. Isn't there, I'm going to, just for being obnoxious, I'll question the idea that we're in an optimal form, because a book itself is limited. A book is hard to update, hard to link into and out of, hard to be collaborative around, hard to be multimedia, hard to be interactive with its reader. Aren't there all kinds of new opportunities we've yet to explore?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's the first 100 years or so of print, manuscript writing coexisted. Manuscript coexisted. The act of writing, the act of making commonplace books. You know, there was this entire period before mass production. Text printing fixed and made permanent a text. And as we talk about this Gutenberg parenthesis, you know, we're now moving through a point where text no longer has to have that fixity. So we're open to a whole entire new form of experiencing story and all those things. But I agree with Erik, you know, the thing about manuscript culture is that people were still copying manuscripts well into the 16th century, and people still use letterpress today, you know. As far as what the book can do, well, I've lost my train of thought. I'll let you pick.
The main thing that we have to, as designers, relearn today is that we don't actually make. We used to make templates. You know, you had a web page and you had a template for the long read and the short reads. What we do these days, we build elements, and then we can rearrange those elements. They'll have to look different on a smartphone, obviously, than on a website. Then maybe, and people do print out stuff, and that's the new lesson for us to learn. That the core that we do is we talk to authors. Authors are our clients. We make their text look good. So we decide the hierarchies according to what's in the text, not what's according to the CSS or whatever. So that's the one lesson we've learned. And a book will need a different form. If you put the same text in a magazine in maybe over a few weeks, or into a newspaper or into a book, it'll end up looking different. But the common denominators will always be the actual words. And our role is to make them look as good as possibly. And now we've come back to knowing we don't have to use system fonts anymore, for example. We don't have to use full sizes. We can use half sizes. We can track, we can kern, we can do anything. So it's ironic in a way that we fought all these years to have the web its own expression. It doesn't need its own expression because the web's gone away anyway. It lives on all sorts of screens, and the best screen is still that one.
Let me, just for the sake of heresy, question the sanctity of the book.
Okay, so this is, I forgot my point. The second half of my point was manuscript culture was limited to the elite. You know, it wasn't a widespread democratic phenomenon. We've had, as I think Erik said, 500 years of this embedded technology. The codex is an excellent technology. And so, it's not going away anytime soon. And I think we all know that there's been quite a pause in the uptake of ebooks recently. You know, the market is settling out somewhat, and book publishing is now looking like 30% ebook, 70% print. So I think that it's a perfect form for certain uses. Paperbacks are cannibalized.
Stipulated, and I'm not killing the book. Indeed, I just published one, so I like, right? Though I published it at the same time on medium.com. The Gutenberg parenthesis you mentioned, there are a couple of academics at the University of Southern Denmark who have really talked a lot about the idea that there's a parenthesis. That Gutenberg was a 600-year exception to how society operates. And that he argued that before Gutenberg, beginning of the parenthesis, knowledge was passed around mouth to mouth. It was changed along the way. There was very little sense of ownership and authorship. The business model was one author, one patron, one scribe, one book. We preserved ancient knowledge. Along comes Gutenberg, and it changes the way we view our world. McLuhan would say that the line, and this sentence is an example, becomes our organizing principle. Knowledge becomes owned and authored. We now honor current intellectuals. Now he says, we're at the end of, Thomas Pettit says, we're at the end of the parenthesis. Here's the argument. We return to knowledge being passed around click to click, remixed along the way. We're fighting over the idea of ownership and authorship. The business model is up in the air. We don't know what it is again. We honor the network over the author, the collection of people. And so his point is that the book affects our cognition of society. It makes us into container people. It makes us want to put things, we call it content. We want to put things in a container.
But
we want the container to have a beginning and an end.
The book, however, the book was the only thing that enabled us to preserve the cultural DNA of our species. And that's not a light thing. You know, so if we go back to, as I was saying, I can imagine a digital commonplace book. We were in that realm now. We're back to the 18th century. People annotate. People may make their own personal books digitally, assembling the bits and pieces they like. But, you know, the great virtue of fixity and permanence is that you preserve this trove. And
but
so
there's a disadvantage to fixity and permanence, too.
Absolutely.
It becomes wrong at some point.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
I don't know, what about movies? I mean, they're 90 minutes long and they finish at some point. What's wrong with stories? Obviously we like stories. I'm not talking about information journalism, where we need to know the author these days, because we don't know who to trust anymore, because any idiot can go out there and publish. It doesn't take more than an online connection these days, which is very scary. So also the people are using that to our disadvantage, to their advantage. I don't want to go into politics, but that's what's happening right now. So who do we trust? We trust authors whose name is on the front or somewhere in the byline. And the authors could be a collective authors, like a publishing house or whatever. The reason why we read Spiegel or Die Zeit here in Germany is because we trust those guys. We understand they've done their homework, regardless of what medium they're published in. And the book is the utmost trust. You have it in your hands. The author can't interfere anymore. He can't lie anymore. The book is there, or she, I'm sorry. And it's a finite piece of storytelling, and we'll always love it, regardless of how it's delivered to us, whether it's in printed or in digital form. The book itself.
And I'm not going to deny that I love books, right?
By the way, paper books will definitely die out. They're totally superfluous.
Right.
They're rubbish.
But I guess what I want to do is push. I have the same problem in my business, in journalism, in newspapers. We still try to think that we are storytellers and story-based. We're starting a new degree at my university, at CUNY, in social journalism, which says that the story is not the center, the content is not the center, media is not the center, the community we serve is the center. Journalism is a service, and we can do it in all kinds of new ways. So I just want to push one more time on, now that we have the opportunity, how would you each reinvent the book?
Well, the book is being reinvented as we speak. There's a resurgence of bookshops, for example. Seattle, New York, those places, San Francisco, have new bookshops. The book is becoming more of a niche, as you say, Nischenprodukt, we say in Germany. Obviously, it's getting narrower. You're not going to print 200,000 anymore. People in Germany print 2,000, 5,000. In America, it's 8,000 normally first run. So, but then the book has to be an object. Because we buy experiences, we don't buy objects, we don't buy information, we don't even buy stories, we buy experiences. We can hold a book, look at it, smell it, keep it, becomes annoying. I have 6,000 books,
so you said
it's a nightmare.
the paper book is somewhat...
Well, that's only the container for information.
Fine.
The book wants to be an object.
So push the experience. What else can you do with the experience of what we knew as a book now?
You go.
Well, it's about immersion, isn't it? It's about getting away from the maximum distractibility. And I mean, I think that the enhanced ebook, failure of the enhanced ebook shows us what technology can't bring to the book. You know, people actually, when they want to enter a story in a world of fiction or nonfiction, they want to be in it. And that is really, you know, they don't want to spend their time on screens at night necessarily when they've spent their entire time on the day. So, you know, I'm an advocate for the book as an experiential object. You know, and I wrote this book about the first printed book, and Harper made the most beautiful container you can imagine. And the booksellers tell me this is where the market's going. Hardbacks are getting more beautiful, they're getting more expensive, they're precious, people want to keep them.
And the audiobook, which is how I read it, and
Right.
it's a very good book, by the way, Gutenberg's Apprentice,
Thank
is
you.
more of a performance.
Right. Exactly. And children's books are the other thing, because parents don't want their kids reading on screens. They want to give them picture books. You know?
Bill Gross is here in the audience, and he really advanced the book in the early days of CD-ROMs. All right, as we go for a few more minutes, I want to go to a different topic slightly on this. Back to the idea that Gutenberg was the first technology entrepreneur, industrialist in the world. The birthplace was not far away in Mainz. Germany was the birth of industry and technology as a business. Now, I've heard discussions already around the room today, in this big room and in private discussions and lunches, about the troubled relationships that Germany and Europe have right now with technology and technology companies and innovation and so on. So, what lessons are there from Gutenberg's success, from this incredible heritage that Germany has in technology, industrialization, and capitalism for Germany's present?
Well, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I mean, you know, we are not virtual, we're people. We touch things and we make things, and we Germans happen to be good at making shit, or stuff, things.
Shit's fine.
Whether it's the internet of the thing or whatever you want to call it, we are good at making stuff. We may be a little behind on the hype stuff, you know, making all this virtual crap that nobody, quite frankly, needs. But people do need to drive about, people need furniture, people need fridges, people need machinery. Yeah, and we make that stuff. And whether we put an online receptor in there or whatever is regarded as people like to hold things, and they need to hold things, they need to eat food, and they need to read books, and we're good at that. So I am very positive for
And that was the
industry.
thing I found amazing in researching this book. You know, Nuremberg was, you know, renowned from the 12th and 13th century on for precision engineering. I mean, engineering is what Germany is about. And that hasn't changed. And I find it really interesting because it was the world's first tech startup, and it was here. It wasn't in California. California didn't exist, you know. So obviously the know-how was there. You had the merchant class, you had the Fuggers, you had all these people who created, you had the Hanseatic League. You know, capitalism was born here to a large degree. So I don't see any impediment in the German psyche to
Yeah, and you also know what happens. I mean, you guys start digging up oil, fracking, and we've moved on to the next one. We say oil sucks, let's go on, let's find something else. So I don't think we're behind that much, quite frankly, whatever the propaganda tells you.
Yeah.
I think last year I apologized for the NSA as an American. This year I have to apologize for fracking.
We won't even go there,
yes.
yeah.
1 minute left.
Okay.
I still want to push this idea that if John Naughton, columnist for The Observer, said that if we ran a poll on a bridge in Mainz in 1472 and we asked people, do you think that this invention of Gutenberg's will disrupt the Catholic Church, fuel the Reformation, spark the scientific revolution, change our idea of education, thus of childhood itself, you'd say, no, you're being a technological determinist. How big is this moment of the net? Is this a Gutenberg moment? Is this a moment of a 600-year change in society?
I definitely think so, but I think that we're 30 years into that moment. We're maybe 15 years in our times into that moment, and we're in a moment of great danger because, as I said, the Catholic Church twigged very quickly that this was a bad idea, letting people print what they liked. And from 1485 until Martin Luther in 1517, you could not print a book in Germany unless it passed the censors. So, you know, we're hearing that kind of talk again. And I think, to me, that's more of a concern than questions of authorial ownership and so forth. I think it's keeping the technology free is important.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest threat, that the internet is basically owned by a couple of, well, 4 or 5 monopolies. Border isn't one of them. You know, the Apples and the Googles and the Amazons, that to me is scary. But at the same time, I see the kids in my studio, 70 people, they're not influenced by this. They'll invent their own reality. And I think over the next, whatever, I've been saying, by the way, for a couple of years, that Facebook is a pilot scheme. It's going to collapse under its own weight. I still hope so. I think things are going to turn around, and we, like Alix said, we haven't even reached the apex yet. It's going to look very different. I'm very, very optimistic.
It's not my job to introduce who comes next, but I can't resist making this connection. Dr. Borda is next going to talk about his book. Dr. Borda owns one of the great publishing houses, that owns printing plants still, and believes in printing and believes in paper. But also, Dr. Borda has been, to my mind, in great times, the most visionary publisher in the digital world, someone who had a great affection for that. So it's a great moment where these worlds come together in you, Dr. Burda. So thank you very much for your attention, and on with the show.